Ken Rosenthal with us today, leading the league with information on George Springer's record-setting deal in Toronto. Good morning, Kenny.
Good morning, Matt. And it is a record for the Blue Jays, the first $100 million deal in the club's history, and it's well over $100 million. 6 years, $150 million for George Springer, who will play next season at 31. Is it probably a year beyond where the Jays wanted to go? Yes, it probably is. Just as they did last year with Hyunjin Ryu, they had to go the extra year to get the player. This is quite normal in free agency. But for the Jays, this is a huge move in so many ways. From a baseball perspective, strictly on the field, this is the position of greatest need outside of starting pitching, I would say. And center field is what they needed the most. George Springer is, as we know, a dynamic player, a player with proven postseason experience, a player who, yes, was part of the Astros teams that cheated in 2017 and 18, but had a monster season in the shortened season last year as well. He will have an incredible influence on their younger position players. Remember, George Springer was part of the Astros rebuild, and he knows what that is like. The Jays are on the cusp now of being a really formidable club, made the playoffs last year. And then keep in mind the bigger picture. For Toronto, for baseball, the Toronto Blue Jays play in a major market. Now, obviously, they have a challenge ahead of them this season if they are not able to play in Toronto and have to start the season most likely in Dunedin, Florida, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But at the same time, this is not the first time we've seen the Jays load up like this. You go back to the early 90s and Roberto Alomar, Joe Carter, Devon White, all the guys that they brought in, David Cone, Dave Winfield. And then fast forward, that was under Pat Gillick. Fast forward then to the mid-2010s, 2014 and 15. What did they do then? They signed Russell Martin, traded for Troy Tulowitzki, David Price, Josh Donaldson. And now the next renaissance of the Blue Jays begins with George Springer. Actually, it began last season, if you really want to be honest about it. But this is the next step, the major step that they were looking for. They had a tough time this offseason. We all talked about it. We documented it well, guys. All of the misses that they had this offseason. Francisco Lindor in trade. All the players they lost in free agency, starting with Kevin Gausman and Tomoyuki Sugano, Liam Hendricks. Go right down the line to DJ LeMahieu and Corey Kluber most recently. But now they have agreements with relievers Kirby Yates and Tyler Chatwood, and they have the big splash, the center fielder, George Springer.
You know, Kenny, there were other teams that were involved in bidding for Springer. I'm thinking of most notably the New York Mets. And I don't think the Mets were ready to go to 150. I don't think they were ready to go to 6 years. And certainly the distractions of yesterday's news cycle for the Mets, I'm not saying it distracted from Springer. But do you think the Blue Jays at some point said, boy, maybe we can use this to our advantage. We've made a great offer to George. Let's try to wrap this up, get this done today.
It's a fair question, Ron, with everything that went on with the Mets over the last 36 hours or so, their GM, Jared Porter, being dismissed. Obviously, things changed for that franchise quite dramatically. But at the same time, the Jays were in serious negotiations with Springer even the day before that. So it seems to me there was momentum, and it also seems to me that this deal was going to get done with Toronto. The Mets had a more difficult path to Springer. Of course, they want to extend Francisco Lindor. That's a deal that would be likely in the $300 million range, $350 perhaps. Who knows? They've got Michael Conforto, who's a free agent after this year, a younger outfielder than Springer, but he also is represented by Scott Boras. Might be difficult to sign, but I don't know that they wanted to take themselves out of that equation. And they have luxury tax concerns, let's put it that way. Sandy Alderson, their team president, has called the $210 million threshold a significant demarcation. They're at about 185. Springer at $25 million a year would have got them right there. So all of these things played into it. The Jays do not have luxury tax concerns. I don't know if there were other teams seriously in this. The Astros, I don't know that they were a true factor at all. I imagine George Springer wants a fresh start. And it will be really interesting to see where the Jays go from here. Michael Brantley is George Springer's good friend, former Astros teammate, shares the same agency, the XL Sports Management, and there is a possibility, maybe somewhat remote, but it's possible, that Brantley will be next because this could be an NBA-style package deal. The Jays' other need is starting pitching. Behind Ryu, ahead of some of their less proven guys or less accomplished guys like Robbie Ray, Tanner Roark. But the Jays right now are a fascinating group with Biggio and Bichette and Guerrero looking so much better in shape. I can't wait to watch them play, put it that way.
Hey, Kenny, I wanted to ask you one more question. Less marquee names signed, but maybe not less important to this ball club, Kirby Yates, San Diego Padres closer who now is with the Blue Jays, coming off an injury. What's his status with the injury, and how important is he to the Blue Jays bullpen?
Coming off surgery to repair or remove bone chips in his right elbow last August, and clearly his physical was of greater concern than most physicals that free agents get. Most are fairly routine. And Yates reached agreement yesterday, is my understanding, but we do not know the exact terms yet. Initially, I heard it would be in the $8 million range. Then it was reported it's going to be in the $5.5 million range, which
this is
would
a
seem to be indicative. Well, he was, certainly, but the price would seem to indicate some physical concern. There will be a lot of incentives built in there as well. But that said, if he's right, for a one-year deal, the Blue Jays get what once was one of the best closers in baseball, not long ago, in fact. So that's a good move for them, again, if he's healthy, if the physical goes well and this deal is completed.
You know, with all these deals, there's always a kind of a correlating effect, and you know, how does it impact the next deal and the next set of free agents? So we could talk about the remaining closer types that are out there, also the remaining center fielder types that are out there. Jackie Bradley Jr., Kevin Pillar, who's already had a career in Toronto. One less suitor, one less destination for them. And I would imagine this kind of thing helps their free agency, right? Because if the Mets are motivated, if they're really truly motivated to move Brandon Nimmo to left, then the answer is one of those two guys, right? And the price goes up on each of them at this point. Am I right about that, or am I missing something?
I'm not sure about the price, Matt, but you're absolutely right about the Mets need and the Red Sox need. Both those teams do need center fielders. Both have been involved with Bradley. And getting back to the Mets, one thing in the absence of Springer they probably will emphasize is more of a run prevention type team. Therefore, you go get a defender like Jackie Bradley Jr. You sign a couple of relievers. You bolster your pitching staff, bolster your defense, and try to go about it that way. Again, Springer was going to be on top of Lindor and DeGrom and possibly Conforto, a big ticket item. I don't know that they wanted to get that tied up financially in yet another star. Now, we know Steve Cohen has a lot of money, and we know that he has the capability of signing any and all of these guys, but they're going to run themselves on a budget like every other team does, it seems, and that's just the approach that they're going to take.